Christianity. So think about it. What did they do? Columbus and all of them set out to the Americas, to the Taino people. All the indigenous people, including in Africa, what did they try to do? They came in there and they brought Christianity. See, we think, and rightfully so, we think, oh, they just came up with this stupid Christianity thing and they wanted to come in and push it on the people. But it's a completely different, it's a deeper meaning to it. We have to understand now that even then they understood universal law. They knew because they had religion. See, you can't look at the religion as I just gave you the last video, sole purpose. And those Bible verses, you can't look at it and say, and by the way, if you didn't see sole purpose, you need to be seeing that before you see this. You can't look at it and say, the Bible bullshit, or they were just trying to spread a bullshit religion. No, it was the truth. What's in that Bible is true, not on the surface, but the hidden meaning is the truth. And they gave it to the people. They was giving it to the people, but it was taking them away from real, straight up spirituality and giving them allegorical stories, parables, if you understand. So they told these people like it was real, but the deeper meaning is, we know, allegorical stories, parables. So look at what they did. They went into all these villages. They went into the Taino people. If you didn't convert, you was killed. They wasn't trying to grow and expand. You got to remember, you have the ancient Egyptians when Kemet fell, and there was no direction for those people when they fled into Lower Africa. They knew what they knew, but they began to build different spiritual civilizations. And it was basically, turning back into Kemet, how Kemet was before it fell. And that's why they was enslaved, as I talk about. So we see this huge urgency to get rid of all ancient spirituality. Remember, what the popes was doing and what those rulers was doing, it was making these edicts, passing these laws to basically shut down all the old temples. Remember, we talked about this with Kemet, shut down all the temples, all those old worship places and temples were shut down. And it was almost like it was a systematic thing because we see it across the world. They just abandoned all the temples. The temples was abandoned. The people just moved into different areas and left these structures there to be basically found, centuries later. So one of the things we got to look at, I talked about this before, dragons. So when I talk about magical things, when I talk about the old spiritual things done away with, dragons was one of them. I know people are going to say, well, you're crazy. If you don't believe, if you haven't seen my videos, if you've seen my videos when I talk about dragons, you're convinced they exist. We already know we have fossils. And as I spoke to you about before, we know that dinosaurs were once called dragons. Okay, that's what they called. Dinosaurs were called dragons before they was called dinosaurs. So that can fix any confusion right there. So we have so much information on dragons. It's so many. Just look at these depictions. So many depictions of these people fighting dragons, killing dragons. It was like a thing where you slay dragons. So we have so many ancient, depictions of dragons as if they was real. And there's no cartoons back then. They wasn't making up these crazy stories about these beings, these beasts. They had to have exist for these people to be able to draw them and talk about them. And for so many stories to be made up. Why would they, during these medieval times, because I believe they was around during medieval times, why would they be making all this stuff? And everything fits and coincides with their conquests. They're coming into England, they're coming into European lands, which is, our lands, and they're conquering. And then there is this understanding or edict or what have you that went out that basically said we have to wipe all these dragons out. And then when we go and look, as Maria Gamboudas talk about, this connection supposedly that Black women had with these dragons. It's a big deal. But you have so many people talking about dragons, and we're talking about during these times, prominent people. Maria here says hundreds of years later, The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus also mentions winged armies of snakes. Think about that appear from the lands of Arabia. Professor Mayer said, and the Roman historian Cassius Dio mentions that one day when Regulus, a Roman consul, was fighting against Carthage, which Carthage was black, a dragon suddenly crept up and settled behind the wall of the Roman army. The Romans killed it by order of Regulus, excoriated it, and sent the hide to the Roman Senate. And it says here it just wasn't Roman historians that wrote about encounters with dragons. We're not going to even mention the Bible, but the Bible has it. And you got to think about how long ago it was written, which the 1600s, King James Version, that would be medieval times. So they had to know to write about it. So many historians mention dragons and types of dragons. We know Cicero, which was a Roman statesman, talked about dragons and seeing dragons in Africa. We know the story about St. George and the dragon. I talked about the many Asian, Chinese stories about dragons. We know they have the year of the dragon, the zodiac, everything on that zodiac is real. There's a dragon on that zodiac. So it's so much. I don't want people to just discount the existence of dragons. They existed and they coexisted with us. And there's so many people that talked about that. So you have this, but then you have, as I've shown you the depictions, them being wiped out. It was a thing. It was something that was done that they came together and said, we got to wipe out all dragons. And they went out and they wiped them out and they covered up the whole thing. There was a time where people knew about dragons and talked about it. So when you think about the worst, beast on land and fly and killing livestock and so on and so forth, people had these problems. So it would make sense. As I said, Revelations wasn't added to the Bible to the 5th century. So it's talking about this dragon. So it would make sense to correlate that or to, parallel or make this comparison with dragons, us. When you think about the reptilian lower brain, which we have, you think about this connection with dragons, which is supposed to be a connection that black women have or black people have with dragons. The lower reptilian brain being Satan, representing the darkness, black people, blackness, dragons. Is so much. It fits. I'm not going to get into it too deep, but it fits. But the main point is they got wiped out. They got wiped out along with anything spiritual from the ancient world. So we look at this whole cover up, rid of the ancient world, get religion to be established as laws, and execute people who try to do anything from the ancient world. Alchemy, no. Witchcraft, no. Anything involving spiritual things was a no. This is the new spirituality. Get down with it. Plain and simple. Dragons was done away with. So we had that happen. So now let's go back again. You have this conquest, as I said, Kemet fell. And then you have the wars of the Diadochi. The wars of the Diadochi happened because, they was fighting over territory and land. Who should rule what? Only the people at the highest point probably understood what was taking place. And everybody didn't understand what was the point of all this conquest, just to spread Hellenization. So they had civil war. So you had this happen. While this is going on, you have the Roman Empire rising, plain and simple. They're growing up and they're basically getting ready and poised to take over what the Greeks was doing. Now, again, this is history and what they give us. Some people tell you that the Greeks and the Romans was always in on it. And this whole war, we don't know if it really happened. But we know that ancient historians wrote about it. So I believe that Rome could have been a faction of people who, a civilization of people that grew up and separated from whoever was running everything and did their own thing and established what they established. It makes sense. And then once they came together, what happened? There wouldn't have been no war if they was together from the beginning. They would have just took over everything simultaneously. So I believe there was the Roman Empire and there was the Greek Empire. And then once Rome conquered Greece, we seen what happened. They came together. So we have this. And we look at the Roman Empire and then we see that, they didn't conquer deep into Europe. They didn't conquer deep into Africa. What was the holdup? You had the wars of the Diadochi. And then you had the Persians coming back and fighting with the Romans once the Romans conquered. And then you have the establishment of the Arab kingdom, the Arabs. They came to power and they fought against the Romans. And then eventually you have Islam coming into play. And then right around this time, we see them go into the rest of these European, countries. So look at the map here. I mean, look at all these countries. A lot of people don't realize how many European countries it is. When people think of Europe, they think about Italy, they think about fucking England, Spain. They don't really think about how many other, European countries it is. So look at all these countries. This was all black lands, black territory, black people here. And then at this point, they begin to conquer into these European lands and then go no further into Africa, but they start going deeper into Europe and conquering these lands. So we have the conquest of these lands, right? And again, stick with me. This is going somewhere. I know the agenda. This is everything. So, stick with me on this. You have the conquest of these lands, right? We know them as European lands today. There's African territories, right? This is happening around the same time. It's a simultaneous thing. Fighting here in these lands. And you have the establishment of Christianity. So after they dominate and come into a land, they dominate, they bring their people in, set up civilizations based on Christian values. How do we know this? Go to these countries today. What is the religion? Christianity. And then you start seeing, what happened and what took place when you look at their history. It goes back to a certain point, and when you look at that point, it's the same time. It's the same time frame. 8th century, 7th century, right around the time all this stuff is going on. So when you look at Europe and you see, okay, we have these lands right here. England is not even incorporated yet. It will be a little bit later on. But those lands I showed you, those countries. So who was the, first European, major European ruler after Christianity, came into play? And a lot of people would say Constantine, but Constantine, no. It was Charlemagne. Charlemagne was the biggest, European ruler during this time. And Charlemagne ruled so much. So it says here, Charlemagne, look at the time, look at the date, 742 to 814, right? So around this time, Christianity is growing. And so is Islam. Also known as Karl and Charles the Great, was a medieval emperor who ruled much of Western Europe from 768 to 814. In 771, Charlemagne became king of the Franks, a Germanic tribe in present-day Belgium, France, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and Western Germany. He embarked on a mission to unite all Germanic peoples into one kingdom and convert its subjects to Christianity. A skilled military strategist, he spent much of his reign engaged in warfare in order to accomplish his goals. In 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne emperor of the Romans. In this role, he encouraged the Carolingian Renaissance, a cultural and intellectual revival in Europe. When he died in 814, Charlemagne's empire encompassed much of Western Europe, and he had also ensured the survival of Christianity in the West. Today, Charlemagne is referred to by some as the father of Europe. It says here, Charlemagne expands his kingdom. Once in power, Charlemagne sought to unite all Germanic people into one kingdom and convert its subjects into Christianity. In order to carry out this mission, he spent the majority of his reign engaged in military campaigns. Soon after becoming king, he conquered the Lombards in present-day northern Italy, the Avars in modern-day Austria and Hungary, and Bavaria, among others. Look at the lands I'm naming. This is all the places I just showed you. Charlemagne waged a bloody 3 decades-long series of battles against the Saxons, a Germanic tribe of pagan worshippers, and earned a reputation for ruthlessness. In 782, at the massacre of Verdun, Charlemagne reportedly ordered the slaughter of some 4,500 Saxons. He eventually forced the Saxons to convert to Christianity and declared that anyone who didn't get baptized or follow other Christian traditions be put to death. Now understand when it's saying tribes here, I want you to think about it for a second. Tribes. A tribe is somebody who is probably native to that land. And as I've shown you before, you're not going to find no bone in the lips white folks. We're talking about black people, tribes. But they wasn't going around slaughtering their own people and then repopulating with their own people. it would be much easier for them to go into these civilizations and say, hey, this is what's going on. And we're your people. We're doing it for this reason. Why fight with us when you can join us? And we have so much already. Anglo-Saxons, Saxons is just a region that you can see on the map that's different, that some parts was white, some parts was black. And once they came together to, differentiate the people, you have Saxons, you have Anglo-Saxons, and so many people are going to give you different interpretations of this to hide the fact that the indigenous people of England was black people. Germany as well, they were black people. So these are black people that come in there and they conquer and they're taking over. They forcing these people to convert. It's happening all over the world.